I'm a physicist, in case you didn't know it. I taught physics at Berkeley for 6 years, at Calvin for 16 years. And so I understand energy. Most people in the world, and particularly most people in America, don't understand energy the way they should. It's very difficult. You can't touch it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, etc. You can see the effects of it, but you can't see the energy itself. And I think that is part of the problem that people have in dealing with the problems of energy. They don't really have a good feeling for what it is. And I've often told the story. I apologize to those of you who heard it before, but I wish energy were purple. If energy were purple, you could see it. And if energy were purple and you could see it, when you drive up to your house in the middle of the winter and you see sort of a blue haze coming through the walls, you see little blue rivulets or purple rivulets coming around the windows and the doors, and you say, good grief, I have to insulate this house better. I have to seal the doors and the windows. And if you do it, you'll save a lot of money, but you'll also save a lot of energy. And I know because I've done it. And not in the current house we live in. That's my next project if I ever retire. But I did it on our previous house, very carefully, properly insulated the attic, which was already well insulated by American standards, and our utility bills dropped by 33%. That's worth doing. But you just have to imagine energy, and imagine you can see where it's leaking, all the different corners, crevices, holes, etc. Similarly, if you're driving down the highway and you see a little hybrid car go past you and there's just a tiny little bit of purple coming out of it, you say, uh-huh. And then following right behind that is an SUV with such a big purple cloud you can't even see what make it is. You're going to say, hey, I better get down to the dealer and start looking at one of the new hybrids. So part of the problem with energy is that we don't understand it. Another part is some people don't want to understand it. And that is one of the biggest problems I fight in the Congress. The preconceived notions that oil is the answer or fossil fuels are the answer, and if we can just get more of them, we'll solve the problem. And I'm getting all kinds of criticism in letters because I've consistently voted against drilling in ANWR or drilling in the Outer Continental Shelf. And I have some very angry constituents as a result of that. A lot of angry people who aren't my constituents too. And my point is simply, aside from the environmental aspects, which are very, very important, but aside from that, suppose we do start drilling in ANWR. How much oil is there? About the equivalent of 4 years' usage in the United States. So what do we accomplish if we drill there? We push the problem back a few years, but we still have the same problem. We're going to run out. This is not a new concept. It was first enunciated and elucidated by M. King Hubbert in 1954, when he predicted on the basis of our research use of oil and the amount of oil there and the rate at which we were increasing our use, he predicted by 1970 we would peak out. In other words, our first peak oil would be 1970, we'd peak out oil production in the US and it would start to fall. And in 1970, right on target, that's exactly what happened. So why didn't we panic and get all excited? Because we could just go abroad and buy the oil abroad. Primarily in the Middle East, but later other countries as well. Russia, Cesar Chavez in Venezuela. And believe it or not, our biggest exporter to the United States is Canada. We're getting most of our imported oil from Canada. Nevertheless, M. King Hubbert in 1954 also predicted that that same peak applied to the entire world, and that it would peak out a little beyond the year 2000. It didn't happen, did it? And one obvious reason it didn't, and that is because after the energy crisis, so-called, in early 1970, Americans actually conserved energy, and so did other countries of the world. Remember when we all drove 55 miles an hour? Saved a lot of energy. So we pushed back the peak, but we're likely to have the peak of the Hubbard curve for world production occur sometime between 2010, 2015, somewhere in there. So you can't get away from it. There's a limited amount. And what distinguishes it, what you have to recognize about energy, it is different from all the other resources. We had the same story. The Hubbard curve applies to iron ore. And so we followed that same curve in iron ore, and then we started over the top. But as soon as the price got up, which is what it does when it becomes more scarce, the price went up, we recycled steel. Today, we recycle a huge amount of steel. We export recycled steel to other countries so that they can use it to refine, make other steel. Energy, you cannot recycle. That's a very hard truth, but it's part of the laws of thermodynamics. And if you don't know the laws of thermodynamics, or at least their implications, we're in trouble. And that's part of the problem because the average person doesn't know that. I've always maintained, by the way, this is a side issue, that these people who come up to me and say, oh, I can never understand science. And it strikes me as very strange. Why would it be socially correct to publicly state that you are stupid? If I go up to someone in English literature and I say, oh, I never understood Shakespeare, I never go to his plays or read his plays, I just don't get them, I'd be considered an ignoramus, right? So why is it okay for people to say, I don't understand science, I don't understand thermodynamics? I believe, as a scientist, I have as much right to expect the average educated person to understand the implications of the laws of thermodynamics as they have to expect me to know something about Shakespeare. And if they did, what we're doing now would strike every American as foolish, because energy is non-recyclable.